going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. This is our top 10 hottest selling comics of the week, our weekly video series brought to you by PopCultureZone.com. Before we get into this week's top 10 books, don't forget to check out PopCultureZone.com's. Their links are below. Check them out if you're interested in getting your hands on some awesome exclusive and incentive variants at affordable costs, CGC slabs, and of course all different kinds of pop culture items, including toys and statues. And if you're buying raw books, they ship at a flat rate fee of only $4.99. Pop Culture Zone is also on eBay, where they still hold a 100% customer feedback rating with over 8,000 ratings this year alone. Those links are below. Check them out and make sure you follow them on eBay as well. All right, everyone, here we are with Cover Price's top 10 hottest comics of the week from last week's list. And of course, we're picking out the top 3 and we're giving props or flops. For those of you that are familiar with this video series, I usually ride with my co-host and partner, Jeff, but I want everyone to send some well wishes out to Jeff because he is recovering from COVID right now, so I am flying solo with you guys today. So again, these are books that are 1 week old, and we look at numbers from when these books hit the list 7 days ago, and then I calculate my own data to look at what they did over the last 7 days, and then I give you all a props or flops. So let's go ahead and look at the top 10 list. Coming in at number 10, we got Batman Beyond, The White Knight. This is the black and white thank you variant. 1 per store. Of course, this book was hot for a new Robin showing up. In number 9, we have Spider-Punk number 1. This is the Mike Del Mundo 1 in 25 variant. In number 8, we have the Spider-Punk number 1, Takashi Okazaki 1 in 50 variant. So no cover A on the list this week, but some really cool, unique covers coming in. Number 7, we got Moon Knight number 1. We all know why these Moon Knight books are on the list. Number 6, we have Werewolf by Night number 32. Of course, is the first appearance of Moon Knight. Number 5, we have Brightest Day. Number 4, this is the first appearance of Jackson Hyde. There's a lot of interesting first appearances surrounding this character, aka the second Aqualad. Number 4 is Batman Beyond, The White Knight number 1. This is cover A. Number 3, we have Strange Academy, number 16. This is the first full appearance of Howie, a werewolf-like character that people are speculating might tie into Werewolf by Night. We shall see. Number 2, we have a Battlestar Galactica, number 1. This is the first appearance of Battlestar Galactica and its main characters in comics. And coming in at number 1, man, I'm personally impressed that this book is still on this list now after a couple of weeks and is coming in at number 1. Amazing Spider-Man number 93, the Patrick Gleason variant. So, of course, this is the first appearance of Ben Reilly as Chasm, or Chasm, however you want to say that name. I don't know the correct saying, so I'll throw both of them out there. I had this book on my props or flops list last week. I gave it a huge flops. We shall see. It's coming in at number 1 this week, so very interesting, right? All right, so there's the top 10. Guys, let's go in to my 3 picks. My third pick, folks, is Battlestar Galactica number 1. Now, okay, I'm going to be completely transparent with this book. So I may be a little bit biased for this book, and let me tell you why. One reason is I did recently, some weeks back, I had this on a top 25 comics to invest in for under $25. I think there's a lot of value to be had in this book. And then about a week later, Reggie Collects talked about this book as well. So a lot of eyes on this book right now. And then just last week, I came into a collection that had a couple copies of this book as well. So that's complete transparency. But let me talk about this book a little bit. We're going to go over the numbers. 142% upward trend in sales. Now, when we say last week, that was when the book hit the top 10, okay? So last week's high, when it hit that top 10, in a 9.8, it sold for $295. This week, as of today, the high 9.8 sold for $335. That is a 14% increase in value. Like I always say, though, folks, and I always want to give you this, foresight. Don't get caught up on highs. Depending on how many 9.8s are on the market for sale at any given time, it could mean the difference of one or two bidders kind of bidding that price up. So, I wouldn't say, oh, this book is like on fire. It caught heat up 14%. It's just like I said, it could be the difference between a couple bidders, but at least it's holding solid, in my humble opinion. Now let's look at these raw averages. Last week's average raw, when it hit the top 10, it was sitting at about 15, and currently this week it's sat at about $15. So again, like I always like to say, when it comes to average raws, you can't get caught up on average raws as well. You got to take them with a grain of salt because it doesn't pertain to any specific grade. For a book that's over 40 years old, you could have more low grade or mid grade books selling one week than the next, which could skew a fair market value average lower. But coming in, and I looked at all the sales, and I think there was a good average, a solid average from both weeks of different grades on the market. So you're seeing the book follow a very similar trend on the market. Now, the big hype around this book is that there has been another live action series. I don't know if they're thinking about doing a live action film. I don't know what it is, but there was a lot of talks about, I want to say maybe a couple years back, about revamping the series. That kind of fell off because of the showrunners or something happened with scheduling, and then they took on another project. I don't know all the details, but talks are at works again to bring it back in a live action format, whether it be a series or a feature film. So a lot of people are looking into this book because of that. I do personally think that this book is a bit undervalued. And for those that watch my channel, you know that I don't like to use the term undervalued loosely, but I think this book has been flying under the radar a lot. Now, I like to compare this book to a couple other books, although they're not apples to apples in any capacity. But you look at what Marvel did in the late 70s, 77, obviously, with the Star Wars #1. Battlestar Galactica is nowhere near Star Wars, and it never will be. But hear me out. You had Star Wars #1, or excuse me, Star Trek #1 in 1980, and of course the Battlestar Galactica #1 came out in 1979. So you had all these sci-fi properties under the Marvel licensing belt in the late 70s, early 80s. And I think there's a lot there now that they're aging out, and there's, the nostalgia behind them for one. Obviously, even Star Trek, I don't think, can compete with Star Wars at that level, even though Star Trek fans might, crucify me for saying that. So in no way do I feel like a Star Wars #1 or this a Star Trek #1 or this Battlestar Galactica #1 will ever be a Star Wars #1. But I think, as you all have seen what Star Wars #1 has done over the last, we can even go back 10 years, but more importantly, over the last 5 years or so, I think there's room for growth for the Battlestar Galactica book, even though it'll never reach the Star Wars height. So just keep that in mind. Do I give this book props or flops? That's the real question that we're, asking here. I'm going to give this book props. Like I said, I've talked about it recently. It's been hot on the market. I think there's a lot more here than just, oh, there's another live action property coming out. Like I said, first appearance of all these characters in comic book format. But the thing that I don't know is print run. And I always say print run doesn't mean everything, but we always got to take it into consideration, especially when we're comparing it to other similar properties like a Marvel Star Wars #1 or a Marvel Star Trek #1. And Star Trek #1 doesn't command that very much high of a value as either. But are the print runs similar, right? Are we seeing a similar amount distributed back then? And what does that mean for the market today? So while I give this book props, I would still be very careful, dropping a lot of money on this book. Personally, as I always say, I stay away from the 9.8s. Now, this is a Bronze Age book, so at least it's not a modern. You probably won't find as many 9.8s out there, but you still have, if you're paying around $300 for a 9.8 of this book, you still have a great possibility of paying anywhere from maybe 25, 30. I saw a couple of books sell for over 50 that were stated as near mint. You have 9.8 candidates out there to where you could probably save money going that route, but that's the risk that we're all having to take if we want to go that avenue. So, all right, but props to this book for sure. Let's move on to my second book, folks, and that is Brightest Day #4, the first appearance of Jackson Hyde. Okay, let's look at what the numbers are showing for this book. First off, we had a huge bump when it made the top 10, 269% upward trend in sales. Now, there was no sales of any graded books for the last couple of weeks. Please don't mind that 14% increase in value. That was for the prior book, guys. I do apologize for the error on the graphics. There was no graded data for us to go off of this book. What there was, though, were the raws. Last week's raw, when it made the top 10, was 40. This week's high raw, 39. So they were doing very similar things over this last week as well. Now, what has gotten this book hot and on this list? That's that we had an announcement the week prior of a Aqualad HBO Max project headed by Charlize Theron, which is very interesting to hear. I don't have any negative thing to say about that. I'm always wanting to be optimistic for all of these HBO Max, DC Warner Brother projects, or even the live action theatrical releases. But you know, I'm I'm not investing too much thought into it because of personally where I felt with all the DCEU and live action DC properties. Although the latest ones have been pretty solid and I've thoroughly enjoyed them. What do I think of this book? Props or flops? Man, here's the thing before I give my answer. We have to look at the recent high raw before the announcement. It was sitting at about half the value at an average of $20. This is a very modern book, and you got to understand the Jackson Hyde history. Jackson Hyde showed up as Jackson Hyde and didn't show up until Aqualad in another Brightest Day. What was it? Brightest Day #9, I think, where he was like on the cover as Aqualad, but he wasn't really introduced as Aqualad until I believe it was the Rebirth series, and they like totally retconned and revamped his character. So it's tough when you have a character that shows up as his human persona and then takes the mantle like a Aqualad, right? So while I do think this book has staying power, I'm going to give this book flops right now. I'm ultimately going to give this book flops, and I'm not giving it flops because I think it's a horrible book. I'm going to give it flops because of two things. One, I don't trust the spec value put out for this book. Now, and if we start seeing 9.8s being sold for $300, $400, I'm going to give it even more flops because I don't trust the live action DC properties, especially when it comes to TV shows, really holding their weight for these books. We might have an outlier or, something that's going against the grain when it comes to what James Gunn has done with the Peacemaker show and those characters. We may see some values holding with those characters, but I don't trust it. So for me to give it flops is that this is a very volatile book right now, in my humble opinion. If this series comes out on HBO Max or whatever it is, and it's a complete flop itself, I'm not going to say this book is going to tank, but believe me, people are going to be trying to off this book and sell this book as quick as they possibly can. And I do believe it's going to really hurt the value of this book. And here's another thing. While I usually say when we get, and this goes for Marvel especially, just because we know they have such a solid track record, usually comic books, even when they get speculative value, at least they hit a new floor. Even West Coast Avengers 45, first appearance of White Vision, even though that book has dropped off immensely, it still hit a new floor. It's still selling for more than what it was selling for before we saw White Vision show up in WandaVision. If this show does really, really bad, I think there is a possibility that this book could drop off under that $20 average that it was selling before we got an announcement. I do. So that's why I'm very skeptical with this book. It's way too risky for me even to spend. I'm not spending $30, $40, $50 for this book whatsoever. I mean, Look, if you can find a nice high grade for under the $20 mark, maybe, but you got to be invested in the character or you got to be willing to take the risk, as I always like to say. But hey, if the show was good, it could prove me wrong, and maybe people can really be invested in Jackson Hyde. And I want to end on this note when talking about this book. I'm fully invested in these newer, younger characters. I really am. I want success for the newer, younger characters. I just haven't seen DC be successful with them in live action properties. So, they got a lot of work to do and a lot of showing and proving to do for me. All right, everyone. Before we get into my number one pick this week, I do want to remind you all that if you are in need of comic book supplies, check out bcwsupplies.com and you can use the discount code JOURNOS to receive 10% off of your order. The link is in the description below. And remember, this code can be used as many times as you want. It never expires. And as I always say, I do stand behind BCW's product. Most of what I buy is BCW, not all. So very, very quality product that you could save some money on by using that Journos code. But let's get into my first pick, folks. It is, how can I not pick this book? This is Werewolf by Night 33, the first appearance of Moon Knight. Props or flops? All right. Let's look at the numbers, everyone. 365% upward trend in sales. Major. That is major, folks. Last week's high 9.6 sale, when it hit the top 10, was for 19,200. But look at this, folks. A record high of a recent sale was on March 23rd for 26,500 for that 9.6. That's a 38% decrease in value. Oh my gosh. Freak out. The book is dropping. It must mean the show is trash. People are getting scared. Props or flops? No, folks. I give this book props all the way without a doubt. Let's put things into perspective. There are only 89.6 graded comics on the census of this issue. Now, I know I say a lot. Don't get caught up on census count. Just because it has a low census count doesn't mean that it's valuable. Well, let me tell you why this 80 on the census of this high 9.8, which means there's even less 9.8s. Excuse me, this is a 9.6, which means there's even less 9.8s. I'm going to tell you why that actually is important to the value of this book. This is a 25-cent early Bronze Age book. If it was a modern book, it would be a different story. It is also a book that I've considered to be a blue chip key for a long time now. This book has been increasing in value way before we even knew that we were going to have a Moon Knight TV show, before we had an Oscar Isaacs casting, any of that. This book was already increasing in value. So with those variables being put into place, that means the demand for sending these books into CGC or CBCS continue to increase, especially for high grade copies, especially folks that said, I'm trying to get that 9.8, or maybe I know I have a 9.4 or a 9.6. So for all those things to be at play over the last few plus years speaks to the fact that there's still only 80 copies on the census. That means to me that this book is absolutely going to be decently scarce on the high grade census for years to come. And that matters. That matters when you look at supply and demand. Now, remember, Cover Price picks their books because of units sold. That upward trend in sales right there. That's what matters. This book, overall, graded and raw copies, had a 365% upward trend in sales. That means this book is selling massive units. And why is that? Because of the show. Because we're 3 episodes in, or when this came out, I think we were 2 episodes in. People are loving the show, folks, and people are wanting to buy Moon Knight. It's that simple. It's absolutely that simple. When we look at the price drop, though, in this 9.6, again, I go back to these factors. Keep in mind, there was only one that sold the week that this made the list, and there was only one that sold this week. There are very limited amounts of this book on the market at any given time. So while I know that that 38% increase or decrease is a lot, while I know that $7,000 plus is $7,300 is a huge drop, I don't think it's an indicator of this book moving forward. I think it has to do, as I always say, with the simple fact that it could be the matter of a couple high rollers bidding on a book at any given time. $26,000 and $19,000 are a lot of money that the average collector simply does not have in their pocket to spend on a book at any given time. These are people that have something saved up, that aren't invested in this, or they simply are high rolling and are of an upper echelon that have the money to spend. And when those two people that bid that up to 26.5 a couple weeks back, maybe they were done, maybe they were content, maybe the other person that didn't win it bought it at a heritage auction or somewhere else, and somebody else on eBay only had 19.2 to spend. So I'm not too concerned with the price drop for a high grade of this, okay? I would definitely monitor the high grades moving forward, and while monitoring the census count to see how slowly it increases, because I do believe it's going to be a slow increase while demand continues to increase at a faster volume, which essentially can continue to drive the value of this book up. Now, I want to talk about one more thing about this book before I wrap up today. This is very important as well. Almost 1 year ago, I did a video asking the question, what is the best Bronze Age blue chip key to invest in? I talked about Werewolf by Night 32. I had Hulk 181 on there, obviously. I had Amazing Spider-Man 129 on there. And then I had Giant Size X-Men #1. And I looked at a few different categories, okay? I looked at increase in dollar amount. If it's worth $20,000 and now it's worth $50,000. I also looked at increase in, which is return on investment in percentage, like percentage-wise, not looking at dollar amount, looking at the percentage of increase. I also looked at rate of return year to year, meaning percentage-wise, how much percent did it increase each year, increase or decrease each year? Hulk 181 won one category, and that was increase in dollar amount solely. But remember, Hulk 181 was already the most valuable one. And I looked at this was like a 5-year or 3-year increase. So I was looking all the way back to it was either 2016 or I do believe it was 2016. So over that time, Hulk 181 increased most in dollar amount. But you know what the winner was in every other category? Werewolf by Night 32. It had the highest return on investment over those 5 years in terms of percentage. It had the highest year over year rate of return percentage as well. So I think that is a huge indicator of what this book is going to continue to do on the market, especially now with what the Moon Knight show is doing. And I know not everybody may simply love it, or there's still going to be people that aren't even a fan of it. But I'm telling you folks, the majority of people are taking the show in, and they are absolutely just enthralled by this character. It's driving a lot of people to the comics. I pay attention to the community and what folks are talking about, and they're saying, I've never been a huge fan of Moon Knight, but this show has got me killing. I want to know more about the character. I want to get back into his books. Believe me, this book is doing things, and I think the show is going to keep propelling it. I really do hope Oscar Isaac continues to play the role for years to come. So a huge props for this book right here, folks. So those are my 3 picks today. Let me know what you all thought of my picks in the comments below. Let me know if you would have gave them props or flops. But before we end, I do want to give a huge shout out to all of my Patreon members. As always, thank you so much for supporting me month after month. Just want to name all you guys off. So big shout out to Tread the Shipping Guru, John Rowe, Nexus Cowboy, Comic Book Museum, Sherry, Verified, Kyle, Justin, Kenwick, Jordan, X11 Bravo, Shelby, Kenneth, Rich, Tony T, Larry, Michael, Tricky Clicky, Alvin, Fletch Comics, Pedro, Peter, Joe G, Larissa, Sagi, Dan, and Simon. Thank you guys so much. If you all are interested in becoming a Patreon member, it's only $3.99 a month. That link is in the description below as well. And of course, I got to give a huge shout out and thank you to all of my YouTube channel members. If you guys are interested in that, you can click that join button below, and that's only $1.99 a month. Big shout out to Shadow Rat, Christopher Johnson, Pickle, Ric Flair, Brandon G, Jack B, Kevin Davey, Comic Book Poser, Mikey, Goonish Lurker, Brandon H, Brandon G, Nexus Cowboy, Lisa, That Mountain Air, Buddy M, Josh Z, Ariel Red, Azorus, Matt Labno, Battle 66 Delta, Comic Journey, X11, Gordon Sis, Joshua EW, Mick, Arthur, Sean, Simon, Comic Ozzy, Kaya B, Ghost Jump, Prime Time, Treasure, Rupert, Michael O, Luis, Peter R, Tony T, and Chris O. Thank you all so much. Thank you guys for watching today. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Be well, and until next time.